Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I'm going to be going to a Christmas party tonight in Cedar Key at one of the oldest bars. I don't know if it's the oldest bar in Florida. It might be. But it survived all the hurricanes, and I recently heard that the reason for that is that it's built out of cob. And, cob is what some of the oldest structures were ever made of, and still surviving in England, mostly 6,000 years old. So I do have a playlist, and there is a cob playlist, because one day I am going to build a cob house for myself. But anyway, today we're just going to breeze through a few articles, just so I can get these out and move on to some other ones that I have. So this one is right here. It's from 1899. The largest tree in the world is to be seen at Mascali, near the foot of Mount Etna, and it is called the chestnut tree of 100 horses. Its name rose from the report that Queen Jane of Aragon, with her principal nobility, took refuge from a violent storm under its branches. The trunk is 204 feet in circumference. That's freaking crazy. I wonder if the trunk is still there and they call it a plateau. The largest tree in the United States, it is said, stands near Bear Creek on the North Fork of the Tule River in California. It measures 140 feet in circumference. The giant redwood tree in Nevada is 119 feet in circumference. So they don't say if these other ones are redwoods or not. I'm assuming that they are. Okay, this next one is from 1905. Giants of History. Turner, the naturalist, declares that he once saw upon the coast of Brazil a race of gigantic savages whose average height was over 10 feet, some individuals exceeding 12.5 feet. M. Thevet of France, in his description of America, which was published in Paris in 1575, says that he was once Prescott, when the skeleton of a South American savage 11 feet and 2 inches in height was disinterred. The Chinese Louvre and Blanc of several giants between 12 and 16 feet in height, which have lived in the Flowery Kingdom within the last 300 years. Josephus mentions a Jew who was 10 feet 2 inches, and Pliny was well acquainted with Gebeth, the Arabian giant, who was 9 feet 9 inches in height. Coming down to modern times, we find that John Middleton, who lived in the time of James I, was 9 feet 3 inches and had a hand 17 inches long by 8.5 broad. Murphy, one of the celebrated trio of Irish giants, Charles Byrne and O'Brien being the other two, was 8 feet 10 inches and O'Brien 2 inches taller. Wow, so the other guy was 9 feet. All right, so this one is 1908. Digs up giant skeleton. Ohio farmer uncovers bones of an Indian woman. Lebanon, Ohio. When digging into a gravel bank on his farm near Stubbtown, this county, John Watkins discovered the burial ground of Miami Indians. The skeleton of a huge woman was unearthed. It was 7 feet 5 inches long. Much excitement was aroused among the farmers in the vicinity, and further excavations brought to light other skeletons of this extinct race. Some were found in sitting positions, and some on their faces. Watkins will try to interest the State Archaeological Society in his find. Okay, and this will be the last one. And I'm not sure what year it's from. Let's see if it's on here. Nope. Old-time mysteries. Some riddles in life that have never been solved. Lands and peoples that are supposed to have disappeared. The legend of the lost Atlantis. The ancient Pygmies of Tennessee. The public appetite craves nothing so much as a riddle, a secret to guess. But nowadays every man's life is so bare, so exploited, and we live so much out of doors from the cradle to the grave, that very few facts or fancies can be kept hidden. There were, however, certain mysteries which during the last century the American public pondered and worried over, which are yet unsolved, and except by a few old people are almost forgotten. One of these, perhaps the oldest, is the question whether beneath the Atlantic, not far from the Bahamas, there is a sunken continent known to the Greeks as the lost Atlantis. It was still talked of familiarly in the first half of the last century. Seafaring men declared that when the water was calm and clear, they had caught glimpses of ancient cities beneath, with their glittering roofs and spires, and that in certain conditions of the atmosphere, the tolling of the bells could be distinctly heard. See, we read a lot of other articles from all over the world about that, where people could hear the tolling of the bells under the water at certain times of these sunken cities. Treatises were written by learned professors to prove the probability of the legend, and other treatises as learned and vehement to flout and jeer at it as an idle fable. Certain flotsam and jetsam, which was washed ashore after heavy storms on the coasts of Georgia and Florida, logs of strange woods unknown to this generation, coins, bits of carved marble, and beaten brass, was ascribed to the long-dead workmen of Atlantis. The lost colony is now known only as the subject of an ancient fable, but years ago it was by most educated people believed to be an actual fact. Another much discussed mystery then was what had become of the colony of civilized people who at the time of the settlement of the country lived on the western coast of Greenland. That country is, as you will see by a glance at the map, shaped something like the half of an egg, cut lengthwise, the flat side upon the earth, the point to the south. The rounded center is a heap of impenetrable ice mountains. As the centuries go by, enormous bodies of ice slip from it into the sea, and breaking off, drift slowly down along our coasts. These are the icebergs of the Atlantic Ocean. Now, along the narrow slip of habitable land which edges Greenland on this side, tradition says, once dwelt a civilized people who, both in knowledge and the habits of life, were far in advance of the Laplanders. They were well known to the early Danish navigators, who made frequent mention of them in their logs and reports. The question yet unanswered is, where are they now? Tradition among the Laplanders reports that the whole colony 2 centuries ago emigrated in a body to the eastern coast of Greenland, attempting to cross the hitherto impenetrable masses of ice in the center. No tidings ever have come back from them. Some of the scientific men who accompanied the Hayes expedition made this question a matter of special study. They reported that a doubt could hardly exist that these people did once inhabit that part of the coast, and that they now had utterly vanished. If they had been swept away by a pestilence, their household belongings at least would be left to tell of them, but not a shard of pottery, not a single grave, remains to show that they ever lived. It was supposed by the Danish missionaries that they had perished in the ranges of ice mountains, but among the Laplanders there were traditions that they had safely reached the western coast and settled there, now forming a civilized community, wholly isolated from the rest of the world. One of Nansen's voyages was, in fact, directed to that coast in the hope of finding this colony. He was not able to reach the northern part of the coast, and the mystery is therefore yet unsolved. Another problem which perplexed the last generation was the long extinct pygmy race, which centuries ago undoubtedly inhabited the Tennessee mountains. Legends among the Indians told of such a tribe of dwarfs who were supposed to be more intelligent than the red men. But these legends were very hazy. A burying ground, however, actually was discovered in the early part of the last century, in which all the skeletons were of pygmy proportions. Some of them were carried away to college museums, but as far as I know, no scientific inquiry has ever been directed to this question. Another curious matter which caused much speculation in the early part of the last century was the fate of the colony of French emigres who fled to this country in the 18th century and took refuge in the northern part of Alabama. Like those Frenchmen who found safety in Delaware, they were for the most part of noble breed. Marquises and counts earned their living in Wilmington as dancing masters and even chefs, and their descendants live there still. But the poor gentle folk who went penniless to Alabama to escape the guillotine penetrated the wilderness and made up a colony of vine growers, farmers, etc. They worked helplessly a while, starved, and then melted away mysteriously. Whether they returned to ungrateful France or died in their exile, nobody knows. It was a romantic, tragical question which much interested the last generation and is now forgotten, but it is still unanswered. So, I guess every generation has their unanswered questions, and for us, 100 years later or so, they're still unanswered. But we're going to put the puzzle pieces together, and one day we're going to figure it out. All right, I hope you have a great day, and be healthy and be happy.